We discussed in an earlier video that brake fluid contains an additive package to prevent corrosion and to treat the seals in our hydraulic brake system. We also learned that brake fluid can have moisture in it. In fact, DOT 3 and DOT 4 brake fluid absorb moisture out of the surrounding air. DOT 5, which does not absorb moisture as DOT 3 and DOT 4 can have moisture in it by means of condensation. Beyond the accumulation of moisture, the additive package in your brake fluid will gradually age and lose its ability to protect your brake system. Corrosion will be inevitable. The solution is to routinely bleed the brake fluid in your brake system. About every 2 years is recommended. Doing this removes the moisture and gives you a fresh additive package. Routine bleeding of your brake fluid also offers a windfall. During hard braking, tiny traces of moisture in the brake fluid can boil and create microbubbles. You can also get microbubbles when you take your foot off the brake pedal. The spring inside the master cylinder pushes the piston back, and for a brief moment we have vacuum in the brake system. And in that moment, microbubbles can get around the seal in the wheel cylinders. A simple bleed removes those bubbles. So, by bleeding, the moisture is gone, you get your additive package restored, and you get your firm pedal back. This should be an inexpensive walk in the park. But for most of us, at least once, brake bleeding has been an ordeal. How can a simple bleed become an ordeal? Today we'll talk about 2 reasons. First, imagine you're driving your car. You step on the brake pedal. It travels, 10, 20, maybe 30% of the way to the floor? That's it. You never push it all the way down. If you had Superman's eyes and you could see inside the master cylinder, you would see the piston and the seal inside here, and they only go back and forth, and it's between 2 points. It just goes here, 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 here. In fact, let me see if I can show you. Okay, this is a piston assembly, and right here, this is the seal. So she rides inside more or less like that. And when I step on the pedal, she maybe goes this far, and when I let go, she comes back and forth, okay? So day after day, you step on the brake pedal. Thousands of strokes of travel. The pedal travels pretty much the same distance every single time. That means that inside the bore, the area where the seal travels will be polished, thanks to the seal travel. Now, what's lurking beyond the area where the seal routinely travels? Frankly, it can be ugly there. If you look down the bore of an old master cylinder, you can see it. The beginning of the bore is polished, okay, and that's from the seal going back and forth. Okay, the deeper end can be much different. The effects of age take their toll. The walls of the bore can be compromised. Now, imagine Joe, the owner of a classic car, decides to bleed his brakes. We've all seen it. Joe's under the car, his helper's in the driver's seat. Joe asks his helper to pump up the brake pedal. Pump, 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 pump. And now the guy's sitting there, he's got his foot on the brake pedal. Under the car, Joe goes and he opens the bleeder. Now, with the bleeder open and the helper's foot on the brake pedal, the pedal goes all the way to the floor. Inside the master cylinder, this seal right here travels well beyond the normal zone and enters into the unknown zone. The seal can get damaged by imperfections in the walls and the bore down there. What started out as a simple bleeding exercise can end up damaging the seal. We've all heard it. I bled my brakes all weekend and I can't get a good pedal. Well, yeah. What's happened here is this seal has been damaged. It has to be replaced. Another way where people get into trouble is simple forgetfulness. They've got the reservoir. They go ahead and they fill it with fluid and they start. And we're pumping and bleeding and pumping and bleeding and pumping and bleeding. And we can forget to check this. And when we do, if we use up the fluid that's in here, what's going to happen is we're going to start pushing air into the system. There's no way that can be good. Is there a way to avoid these 2 problems? Yes, and it's easy. It will cost you some fresh brake fluid, it'll cost you a length of vinyl tubing, and it will cost you a little patience. The method is called gravity bleeding. Note, restoration shops will sometimes use gravity bleeding. Most professional shops never use it. Gravity bleeding is simply too slow for them. A shop will use a power bleeder. With that, they can bleed the brakes in minutes and get another car into the bay. In other words, make money. That's what they're there for. Gravity bleeding is a simple, easy way to bleed your brakes that requires no special tools, no pumping, no helper. There are 5 steps involved, and they're easy. Let's see if we can look at them. Step number 1. we're going to need access to the bleeders in all four wheels of the car. And we need to be able to do it safely. Some people put the car in jack stands, some people have to take the wheels off, some don't. What you want, the bottom line is simple. We need accessibility to these four, and we need safety. Step 2, go to your reservoir, get a towel, clean the dirt and the soil off the top of the cap, okay? When you get all through doing that, take your towel, and take actually probably a couple of them if it's necessary, and we want to make a kind of a ring around the reservoir. Why? Because in a moment I'm going to take this cap off, and when I do, if there's any fluid in here, it's going to run down and drip off, and brake fluid and paint don't get along very well. Okay, also in a minute I'm going to be adding fluid to this. I could get a splash. Again, this is a good idea. I'm going to remove these for the sake of the video, but when you're working you want to keep them there. Now then, the cap's off. We're going to take something like a turkey baster, and we're going to remove as much of the fluid as we can. It's not critical. We don't have to get every single bit of it, but get as much as you can. Then go ahead and refill the reservoir with fresh brake fluid. Take the cap, put the cap back on. It doesn't have to be threaded all the way down, just enough so it's not going to fall off and no debris can fall in here. Step 3. Go to the wheel that's furthest from the master cylinder. In most North American cars, that's going to be the right rear wheel. Remove the dust cap from the bleeder, just like that. Get your piece of clear vinyl tubing and push it onto the gibbous right there on the bleeder. And when you're done, this is what it looks like. Now then, if you can, when you're setting this up, this end's going to be in a bottle, if you can set it so there's a slight rise somewhere along here, that's your advantage. It isn't critical, you don't have to do it, but if it's like that, it will allow you to see any bubbles that are coming up because they'll get caught up there. Now then, we're all set. We put our wrench on here, and we're going to open this bleeder a half to perhaps 3/4 of a turn. Okay? That's it. We're all through with step 3. Step 4, watch the line. In a few moments, brake fluid's going to be able to start coming out of here. That's gravity bleeding. There's no pressure, there's no vacuum, there's no pumping. The reservoir sits higher than the wheel. Gravity goes to work. Now, note the color of the fluid coming out. It can be the color of tea or maybe even the color of coffee. It can get pretty dark. Okay? What we're watching for is a change of color that's going to come in just a few minutes. This first wheel can take 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe a tad longer, until we start to see what we're looking for, and that's going to be clear fluid coming out right here. When we start to see clear fluid, that means fresh fluid from the reservoir made it all the way through the master cylinder, through the line all the way to the back of the car where the T is near the rear axle, over to that right rear wheel, through this and cleared this all out, and finally when I get fresh fluid coming out here, I know this one is done. At that point, step 4 is behind us. Step 5, close the bleeder, remove the vinyl line. Go to the reservoir, fill it again, make sure that we're all set. Go to the next furthest away, which is going to be the left rear wheel of this car. And you can see where we're going with this. We're going to repeat this again. What's interesting now is that this one's going to bleed the second one a lot faster. On the first one, we had to get brake fluid, fresh brake fluid, all the way from the reservoir to the back of the car and over to that other wheel. Now we only have to go from where the T is at the back of the car to this wheel. It's a short distance. There's not much fluid. So the second, the third, and the fourth bleed very quickly for us. Now you know how to do all 4 wheels. A few eclectic notes. First of all, we mentioned that some professional shops will rarely use this method, okay? And that's not because it doesn't work. It's simply too slow. Restoration shops will use this method more oftenly. Well, imagine if they've got an old car in the bay and they need to do the bleed and they don't know how old this is or what's going on inside here. They will choose gravity bleeding because there's no chance of getting in trouble with the seal. That way, if the customer needs this car tomorrow or there's a show coming up or something else, they're not going to have any delays. Everything will go the way that it's supposed to. Okay. This method also is slow, and there's a negative to that. Everything that's slow seems to bother us, but it gives us time to do other things, like keep an eye on the reservoir so we don't run out of fluid. Okay. If you take a look at this bleeder on this one here, this is the wheel cylinder. Okay. The brake line is going to go in from here and put fluid in, and the bubbles, if there are any, will rise to the top. So when I bleed, I'm automatically going to get rid of my bubbles. This is a caliper from a vehicle that would use disc brakes. The brake line goes here, and again you can see that the bubbles are going to go to the top where the bleeder is. So in each case we will naturally get rid of the bubbles. If you have more vinyl hose, you can do 2, 3, or even 4 wheels all at the same time. Because it's not really fast, you can go ahead and take your time about it. And as each one brings the new color through the tube, turn it off, it's done. Some people think that vacuum bleeders are the best way to go. Vacuum bleeders work well. Other people prefer pressure bleeders. They work well. Gravity bleeding is simply a way to work without help or special tools. It's not fast, however, it gets the job done. The bubbles are gone. The moisture is gone. The additive package has been rejuvenated. We've had no harm to our seal. Gravity bleeding works just fine.